Welcome to Chroma Celebs. I'm Rose, bringing you the latest shocking updates on Sister Wives. Unexpected twists, emotional moments, and unbelievable drama. Stay tuned till the end. Let's begin. Kody Brown makes surprising breakthrough in healing his broken relationship with kids. It began as a soft whisper, the kind of change that doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or sweeping statements. It arrived instead in quiet moments, hesitations before phone calls, a softer tone in a familiar voice, a look in the mirror from a man who once seemed immovable. For Kody Brown, patriarch of the once unbreakable polygamous family seen on Sister Wives, healing did not descend like a lightning bolt. It unfolded like a slow sunrise, cautious and unsure, but illuminating nonetheless. The same man who had spent years overseeing a sprawling family structure with 4 wives and 18 children now stood at the center of an emotional transformation that few could have predicted just a few seasons ago. The relationship between Kody Brown and his children has long been a key focus of the show, a rich source of both emotional resonance and heartbreaking tension. For years, audiences watched him lead his family with confidence and conviction, often touting the values of unity, faith, and patriarchal stewardship. But when his relationships with Mary, Yanel, and Christine began to fracture, a deeper, more painful unraveling began to occur, one that had nothing to do with marriage certificates or spiritual bonds, but with the bond between father and child. The distance grew slowly at first, but once it became evident, it was staggering. Kody, once the central pillar of the Brown clan, found himself increasingly isolated, not just from the women he once called wives, but from many of the children who had once adored him. What followed was a period of reckoning, one where cameras caught the cracks not just in the marriages but in Kody's very identity. The man who had seemed so sure of himself for so many years suddenly looked vulnerable, uncertain, and at times deeply wounded. He spoke openly about the pain of estrangement, about the children who no longer reached out, about birthdays missed and milestones passed in silence. For viewers, it was a painful but compelling shift. A fall from grace, yes, but also a rare glimpse into the fragility behind the father figure. But amid the grief and regret, something else began to emerge, something quieter, more enduring. A desire to mend. Kody, perhaps for the first time in a long time, began not just to reflect on what had been lost, but to imagine what could still be salvaged. The man who once insisted that his children needed to come to him began taking tentative steps in the other direction. He stopped waiting at the proverbial doorway and started walking toward it. It did not happen all at once. The breakthrough was not a single moment but a series of choices. Phone calls made, apologies spoken, time spent without cameras or expectations. It was the realization that healing, real healing, requires more than simply holding the door open. It requires walking through it, even if you're not sure who will be waiting on the other side. What surprised many longtime followers of the Brown family was how earnestly Kody embraced this path. He did not abandon his values or rewrite his beliefs overnight. But he began to listen differently. He allowed space for conversations that he once would have dismissed. He opened up to the idea that his children's anger was not just rebellion but a response to unmet emotional needs. And as he did, something remarkable began to happen. There were small signs at first, a visit with a son who hadn't been home in years, a FaceTime call with a daughter who used to screen his texts, a moment at a family gathering where the tension eased just enough to allow a hug. These were not television-worthy events perhaps, but they were monumental in the emotional architecture of a fractured family. Each one represented a step away from estrangement and toward connection. His relationship with Yanel and Christine's children, arguably the most strained after the dissolutions of those marriages, began to thaw. He began to acknowledge the hurt caused not just by his choices but by his absence. In confessional moments, he admitted he had not been the father they needed during the toughest years. And rather than defend his behavior, he began to express sorrow. It was a change not just in tone but in substance. Kody's children, many of whom had grown into adults with families of their own, began to see a different man emerging. Some were skeptical, understandably so. Years of distance are not erased by a single moment of contrition. But others were willing to try to cautiously extend their own olive branches in return. The father they remembered, the one who played guitar at family nights, who built homes with his own hands, who sat with them during quiet moments, had not disappeared entirely. He had simply been buried beneath the weight of expectations and disappointments. And now he was beginning to re-emerge. What makes this breakthrough even more striking is how it contrasts with Kody's public persona just a few years prior. During the height of the family unraveling, he often came across as defensive, stubborn, and unwilling to admit fault. His loyalty to Robyn, the only wife who remained by his side, was seen by many as a source of alienation for the rest of the family. Critics accused him of playing favorites, of abandoning the emotional labor required to maintain the plural marriage dynamic that had once defined their family. But the Kody Brown who is now navigating a path toward reconciliation seems far removed from that man. He is still flawed, still imperfect, but unmistakably more self-aware. A key part of this evolution has been his recognition that relationships must be nurtured, not dictated. He no longer insists that his children come to him on his terms. He no longer couches their estrangement in accusations of disloyalty or disrespect. Instead, he speaks of his longing to know them, to understand them as individuals rather than extensions of his identity. He talks about the quiet joy of being included in their lives again, not as a central authority figure but simply as a dad. Robyn, too, has played a pivotal role in this healing journey. Once viewed as the wedge between Kody and the rest of the family, she has become in recent months more of a supportive presence behind the scenes. She encourages Kody to reach out, to show up, to remain present even when the response is lukewarm. She has been seen in moments of quiet encouragement, reminding him that healing takes time, and that rejection should not be confused with finality. The show itself has also reflected this shift. In recent episodes, viewers have been treated not just to the familiar drama of polygamous divorce but to something more nuanced and heartfelt, the slow rebuilding of a man's role in the lives of his adult children. There have been emotional reunions, shared meals, and difficult conversations where hurt is laid bare and forgiveness begins to take root. These scenes have resonated deeply with audiences not because they are dramatic but because they are real. They speak to a universal truth, that even the most broken relationships can begin to heal with honesty, humility, and effort. As the lights dimmed and the cameras rolled, the anticipation inside the studio was electric. This wasn't just another reality TV wrap-up, it was the Sister Wives tell-all, the long-awaited culmination of a season marked by dramatic exits, simmering resentments, and a reshuffling of what once was considered an unshakable family structure. Viewers tuned in by the millions, drawn by a promise: full transparency, raw emotion, no subject off-limits. The tell-alls had become their own genre within the series. Mini-confessions, therapy sessions in front of an audience, the closest thing the Brown family ever offered to closure. But this time, something was different. Something vital was left unsaid. Something the sister wives, Christine, Yanel, Mary, and even Robyn, consciously, collectively refused to talk about. That omission was not just a silence, but a rupture. A narrative vacuum where truth was supposed to sit. And for loyal followers of the family and your channel, that one silence spoke louder than anything the wives actually said. It hinted at unfinished business, at wounds not yet scabbed over, at trauma too delicate or too dangerous to articulate. And it raises the question, what could possibly be too taboo for a show that has aired everything from childbirths and marriage dissolutions to spiritual crises and custody conflicts? It began subtly. The tell-all was framed as an open arena for introspection. Host interviews were conducted individually to avoid confrontation, a choice some saw as protection and others as a missed opportunity. The format encouraged the wives to reflect candidly on their lives without the immediate reactions of others. One by one, they sat under the hot lights and fielded questions about the end of their marriages to Kody Brown, about Robyn's role in the family power dynamic, about how their children were coping, about their own spiritual journeys now that they were no longer living plural marriage. And yet, when it came to the deep undercurrent that has driven fan speculation for years, the financial arrangements within the Brown household, the rumored inequality in resource distribution, and the alleged siphoning of collective funds, each woman deflected, evaded, or fell uncharacteristically silent. For longtime followers of Sister Wives, this silence was deafening. It's not just that money was never explicitly addressed, it's that every question that brushed up against it seemed to send the women into a synchronized mode of deflection. Christine was upbeat but vague when asked about what she walked away with financially after leaving Flagstaff. Yanel, often more transparent than the rest, mentioned having to start over but stopped short of discussing the specific challenges that came with losing access to shared accounts or properties. Mary, as ever, kept her tone composed but guarded when questioned about her stake in the family businesses or the infamous property known as Coyote Pass. Even Robin, usually verbose when defending her marriage to Kody, hesitated, visibly uncomfortable, when asked whether she and Kody had become the financial nucleus around which everything else had collapsed. This shared silence didn't go unnoticed. It became the ghost in the room, floating through each segment of the tell-all. The host, though skilled in navigating emotional terrain, seemed to sense it too and steered clear of pressing too hard. There were polite pivots, changed topics, soft exits from any question that even hinted at finances. The result was a tell-all that told almost everything, except the one thing viewers had waited years to understand. What made this omission so striking is that finances have always been a quiet engine behind the drama of sister wives. The Browns weren't just navigating relationships, they were managing a shared economic empire, one with shifting borders and inconsistent rules. When the family moved from Utah to Las Vegas and then to Flagstaff, they carried with them not just emotional baggage but financial obligations. Homes were purchased, plots of land were bought, loans were taken out, and shared businesses like My Sister Wife's Closet were launched and later abandoned. Through it all, there was one lingering question: how did this family divide its money? And did everyone have equal access to it? Fan speculation has long suggested that Kody, especially in recent years, directed the flow of family funds toward the household he shared with Robin. Their large home in Flagstaff, purchased when other wives were still renting or living in RVs, became a symbol of inequality. Christine's departure added more fuel to the fire. She left not just a marriage but a system where she claimed she felt devalued, not just emotionally but logistically. Her choice to sell her portion of the Coyote Pass land and move to Utah was interpreted by many as a financial liberation as much as a spiritual one. Yanel's storyline further complicated the narrative. Known for her practicality and deep involvement in managing the family's finances over the years, Yanel found herself effectively homeless for a stretch of time. She moved into an RV while Kody and Robin settled comfortably into a newly purchased house. Her frustration was palpable, but during the tell-all, when asked about those months of upheaval and what resources she did or didn't have access to, she chose discretion. Her voice, which once spoke boldly about her desire to build her dream home on Coyote Pass, grew faint. Her eyes said more than her words. There was a story there, but it wasn't going to be told that day. Even Mary, who had long maintained her own business ventures and seemed increasingly detached from the family infrastructure, skirted around any direct financial revelations. Her emotional confessions about her failed marriage and self-worth seemed almost designed to draw attention away from practical matters. She spoke of heartbreak, loneliness, personal growth, but not of deeds, assets, or bank accounts. And so the tell-all marched on, rich with emotional content, poor in logistical clarity. The sister wives bore their hearts, relived their grief, and shared their triumphs. But the one thing they refused to talk about remained just outside the frame: who paid for what, who owns what now, and how the dissolution of plural marriage affected the material lives of the women who had built that world. To understand why this silence matters, one must understand what was at stake. The Brown family was never just a social unit. It was a brand, a business model, a shared experiment in cooperative economics. By refusing to address how the collapse of their marriages impacted that model, the sister wives left a gaping hole in the story. It's not about voyeurism or idle curiosity. It's about accountability, transparency, and the real-life consequences of spiritual decisions. Fans wanted to know whether the system that had failed these women emotionally had also left them financially stranded. More than that, this silence reflects a larger pattern in how reality television engages with power. The emotional arcs are spotlighted, the interpersonal conflicts magnified, but the infrastructure, the machinery that makes it all run, is often ignored. For years, the Sister Wives franchise has succeeded in making the family seem accessible, authentic, and relatable. Viewers saw the birthdays, the holidays, the tears, and the triumphs. But what they didn't see, what they weren't allowed to see, was how the money moved. This omission is not just editorial. It's ideological. To talk openly about money would be to expose the architecture of power within the Brown family. It would reveal who made the decisions, who benefited, who was left out, and who stayed silent to keep the peace. And in a family structure already frayed by years of imbalance, that may have been a risk too great to take. The question then is not just why the wives refuse to talk about it, but whether they ever will. Will future seasons, memoirs, or interviews break the silence? Will viewers ever learn how the dissolution of spiritual marriages affected property rights, retirement plans, or legal liabilities? Or will this part of the story remain forever obscured, a secret agreement among the sister wives to keep one final aspect of their lives off limits? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain: the silence speaks volumes. In a tell-all designed to close chapters, it left one wide open. And for fans of your channel who have followed every twist, every tearful confession, every carefully edited moment, that open question is more than just curiosity. It's the missing piece of a puzzle they've been building for over a decade. As your channel continues to dissect the emotional and practical realities behind the sister wives phenomenon, this silence offers fertile ground for analysis, commentary, and speculation. What is left unsaid often matters more than what is declared. And in the case of the tell-all, what the sister wives refuse to say may very well be the key to understanding everything that came before, and everything that may come next. Christine Brown looks back at sad sex life with ex-Kody, no real emotion. In the ever-unfolding tapestry of reality television drama, few figures have captured the public's fascination quite like Christine Brown. Known for her role in the long-running TLC series Sister Wives, Christine has evolved from being one of 4 women in a polygamous marriage to a bold, empowered woman standing firmly in her truth. In recent months, she has not shied away from delving into the raw, often painful details of her past, especially her former relationship with Kody Brown, the patriarch of the Brown family. Among the many emotional revelations, one has stood out and resonated deeply with fans and critics alike: Christine's candid reflections on the intimacy or lack thereof she experienced during her marriage. Describing her sex life with Kody as sad and lacking real emotion, Christine's comments have opened a new chapter in the narrative of one of reality TV's most controversial relationships. The weight of Christine's words has sent ripples through the fan base of Sister Wives, a show that has documented the complicated dynamics of a polygamous family for over a decade. From the beginning, viewers watched as Christine navigated her position as the third wife in a complex marital system that promised unity, equality, and love, yet often delivered the opposite. Over the years, it became increasingly clear that Christine's needs, emotional, physical, and spiritual, were being sidelined. Still, the mother of 6 tried to maintain a sense of harmony for the sake of her children and the family structure. It wasn't until her public split from Kody in 2021 that she began to find her voice, and with that voice came the courage to speak about aspects of her life that had remained shrouded in silence for far too long. In a deeply personal moment shared during an interview on the reality show, Christine admitted that her physical relationship with Kody had become more of a chore than an expression of love. There was no real passion, she confessed. No tenderness, no emotion, it was just something that was expected. These words hit home for many women who have been in emotionally unfulfilling relationships, and Christine's bravery in speaking so openly became a point of inspiration. She further elaborated on how, over time, she began to feel invisible, unworthy, and disconnected from her own sense of desire. Rather than feeling cherished, she felt like an obligation, a duty performed without warmth or depth. Kody Brown, often portrayed as the linchpin of the Brown family's unique structure, has been a polarizing figure from the start. While he once championed the ideal of plural marriage as a divine and equitable arrangement, critics and fans alike have pointed out the visible imbalance in how he treated his wives, particularly in recent seasons. Christine's revelations have only magnified this criticism. She recalled how Kody's lack of emotional engagement seeped into every corner of their relationship, but nowhere was it more apparent than in their intimate life. Christine described moments of feeling emotionally starved, noting that even when there was physical closeness, it was void of affection or real connection. This lack of intimacy wasn't always the case. In the early years of their marriage, Christine held on to hope that love would blossom and deepen over time. She entered the relationship with youthful optimism, having grown up in a polygamous family herself. She believed in the principles of sisterhood and shared love. However, as the family expanded and cameras rolled, reality diverged from idealism. Christine began to see that her emotional needs were routinely unmet and, perhaps more dishearteningly, dismissed. Over the years,